This is a story about having too much of a good thing. A U.S. college education has been the path to a brighter future for generations, and the government has often played a key role in that future, starting with the GI Bill paying for higher education for World War II veterans, and then with federal loan programs helping students get their start. But it's not just undergraduates getting these loans. The government has also provided loans for grad students, a program that exploded in recent years, but is now coming to an end because of the One Big Beautiful Bill. Bloomberg's Scarlett Fu has the story.
Like many Americans, Marissa Borer relied on loans to pay for her education, a Master of Social Work degree from Washington University in St. Louis.
Which wound up being a pretty expensive decision to make. Having the debt that I had has absolutely shaped the trajectory of the last several years of my life.
Borer obtained her loans through Grad PLUS, a federal program introduced in 2006 by the George W. Bush administration that allowed students to take out unlimited and uncapped loans. Its purpose was to expand access to graduate education. But it also left young Americans like Borer saddled with significant debt. The program came to an end this month with new limits placed on graduate lending from the federal government. Almost all programs will be capped at $20,500 per year, except for those deemed professional, including law and medicine, which will top out at $50,000 per year. Under the new loan limits, Borer would have been over $30,000 short.
So Grad PLUS loans have historically really filled in the gaps for people who are needing to finance more education.
In the Grad PLUS program's first year, Americans borrowed some $2 billion. By last year, that number had ballooned to more than $15 billion, accounting for over 30% of all graduate student loans. So how did Grad PLUS come to dominate the business of higher education?
After the financial crisis, we had so many families, especially homeowners, who really lost so much of their household wealth. That meant that they weren't able to really contribute to their own education or to their kids' education.
Rohit Chopra is the former director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and its first student loan ombudsman. He is currently the secretary of the California Business and Consumer Services Agency.
We really had a lot of private financial institutions looking to make big money on those PLUS loans. They were able to issue billions and billions of dollars and really take no risk.
The federal government and Congress basically said, hey, look, we can expand federal lending, make loans available to graduate and professional students, and those loans will actually generate revenue for the federal government.
Beth Akers is a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute who studies the economics of higher education. She says Grad PLUS pushed schools themselves to shift the type of degree programs they offered.
Grad PLUS created incentives for institutions to really lean into the graduate and professional education space. So, this was really money on the table, and there was demand. We've been celebrating higher education to such a degree that people felt like these are degrees that they want.
Graduate programs have long been described as cash cows for universities. Although grad students make up just 16% of enrollment, graduate programs account for roughly 40% of student loan debt.
How significant is graduate tuition revenue to Fordham's business model, to your financials?
It is a big part of our model. It's about a third of our revenue.
Tanya Tetlow is president of Fordham University, a Jesuit university in New York City with campuses in the Bronx and Midtown Manhattan. It offers more than 130 graduate degree programs.
Which programs are you worried about the most now that Grad PLUS is going away in its current form?
I think teacher training, K through 12 training, right? It matters so much, and I wish teachers were paid more than they are, but the fact is we need them, and we need them really well trained because the future of everything relies on them.
If the new loan caps leave a student like Borer more than $30,000 short, what are their options to make up that shortfall? Many will turn to private lenders. Ken Ruggiero is CEO of Ascent Funding, which offers outcomes-based student loans.
In about 50 to 75% of the student situation, the private sector can support the student with all the borrowing they need, at rates that are either a little less than the current federal loan or a little bit higher than the federal loan.
Why is there a difference in the rate that some private lenders would charge versus the federal government?
The federal government doesn't pull credit. Credit is priced relative to the expectation of repayment. So when there's a high expectation of repayment, then we can give very, very low interest rates, lower than the federal government.
On the one hand, private lenders use underwriting and credit checks to reduce the risk of students taking on debt they cannot repay.
When a lender comes in and thinks, am I going to make a loan to this student? What they're really thinking is this student going to be able to repay this loan? And quite frankly, that's a good thing for the student.
On the other hand, taking out private loans can be risky and potentially more expensive for students who lack a strong credit history.
There will be a boom for many financial institutions who offer private student loans. Many of them were drooling at the opportunity to be able to take back that lending volume.
With federal loans, borrowers may have ways to get out of default if they find themselves in trouble. What options, if any, exist in the private loan market?
These private student loans don't have any clear consumer protections for when you can't afford your payment. So I'm really worried that student loan borrowers are going to be forking out big payments and leading them to default on their other obligations, maybe falling behind on their auto loan and risking repossession, or falling behind on rent and being at risk of eviction.
One of the Trump administration's stated goals in eliminating the Grad PLUS loan program is to incentivize schools to reduce tuition and fees. But that's easier said than done.
We're thinking about everything we can. It's just very hard to bridge the gap of excellence our students deserve. We're already as frugal as we possibly can be and what they can afford to pay. And the new caps are so low.
So graduate tuition has steadily increased over the past 20 years, with some people attributing that inflation to the availability of uncapped federal loans. Do you think that that's fair?
We are in a pricing model that is very illogical, but it's impossible for us to escape, which is that tuition signals quality in the market. If a school is too cheap, it seems suspicious that maybe they're not as good. So that sticker price does keep rising in the market. And where we've been very flat on price as an industry across decades is on financial aid. And so that net price is the number you need to look at. And that net price has been far more flat than people realize.
So briefly explain how tuition at Fordham is priced. What are the factors, specific factors that come into play for your institution?
We look at literally at the market to see where is our competition and where they're pricing. We're guessing at that for next year, right? Because we don't collude on price. But we look at how good we are and that we should not cost more than an Ivy League institution, but we should not cost less than a competitor who's not as good a quality as we are. That's how we're setting tuition price. How we're setting the actual price is doing everything we can to maximize financial aid, of knowing that we compete almost individually for students.
Fordham did find a short-term fix. Ahead of the July 1st expiration of Grad PLUS, the school announced it would allow students in its social work program to begin classes over the summer, giving them a chance to benefit from uncapped borrowing for one final year.
It was a way to at least put off the pain of what our students would face. But we do know that even then, our enrollment has begun to decline overall, and we are just pushing the pain off until next year, when students will very much not qualify for Grad PLUS.
So it sounds like this was a short-term bridge as Fordham searches for a more permanent solution to this funding gap that's emerged.
Yes, yes. But it's a problem not just for Fordham, but there just will be fewer trained K-12 teachers in the metro New York area for public and parochial and private schools. There will be fewer counselors at a time when families are desperate to find a counselor for their child, and that's a problem for everyone.
Tuition appears unlikely to come down immediately, but in a world where higher education is a marketplace that competes on price and outcomes, students have a choice of where and how they pay for their education. Looking back on her journey, Bora wishes she was more discerning in weighing the costs and benefits of her educational investment.
I would never have done anything differently about getting my master's in social work. However, If I had been able to have a sneak peek of what this debt would look like 10 years down the line from when I started grad school, I really would have looked around much more widely. I would have been a lot more thoughtful about, well, what kind of value am I getting on my dollar?
Ruggiero agrees that it comes down to doing your research.
You should shop around for the best priced loan and the best loan that fits your circumstance. When you're applying into a competitive marketplace like grad programs are, having two schools and letting both of them know that you've applied to two and are considering two can very often get you a better price.
With Grad PLUS loans no longer available, students will now need to shop around more for the best deals, like in any business transaction. But Fordham's Tetlow says higher education needs to be more than just the business of getting a degree. Otherwise, it's easy to lose sight of the costs to the country and communities. Fewer social workers, fewer nurses, and fewer teachers.
It matters that if you know the profession of your dreams, that is absolutely what you want, is not a high-paying one, that you're careful about how much debt you take on. But education is broader than that, right? And I say that not because families themselves should think about the values of democracy and citizenship and making that personal decision, but society should, right? Education is infrastructure as much as roads and highways are. And the countries against whom we compete are investing heavily in education, not just pushing the price of that onto individual families.